Marcus Vale felt the weight of countless eyes burn into him as he stepped onto Celestial Nexus, the orbital diplomatic hub where representatives from a dozen worlds converge. Every gleaming surface seemed to reflect his human form, making him feel conspicuous among the willowy, elegant figures of the cerulean delegation. The crystalline lighting accentuated the otherworldly blue tone of their skin, creating an almost ethereal contrast to his own earthen coloring. His last-minute assignment to the security detail had left him scrambling to review protocols. The basics were clear enough: remain invisible, stay vigilant, and above all, maintain absolute professional distance from Ambassador Terrace. "Officer Vale, avert your gaze when the ceruleans pass," Lieutenant Harlow muttered, materializing beside him. "Their cultural customs consider direct observation impolite." "Understood," Marcus replied, focusing on the polished obsidian floor while maintaining peripheral awareness. "Any particular reason my shore leave was sacrificed for this assignment?" Harlow's expression tightened, the muscles around his jaw visibly straining. 5 security personnel collapsed yesterday. Something in the station's atmospheric calibration their bodies couldn't process. You were the only officer with compatible xenobiological adaptation markers available. Something about the explanation rang false, but before Marcus could probe further, the procession halted. The human delegation stood at attention as the cerulean ambassador approached. And then Marcus saw her. Ambassador Terrace moved with hypnotic grace, each step flowing into the next like water over smooth stone. Her cerulean complexion held a subtle luminescence that seemed to pulse with her breathing, delicate geometric patterns shifting beneath her skin like living circuitry. The official briefings, with their dry descriptions and protocol warnings, had utterly failed to capture her commanding presence, simultaneously regal and ethereal. "Ambassador Donovan," Terrace greeted her human counterpart, her voice carrying undertones that seemed to resonate in Marcus's chest cavity rather than his ears. "I trust your journey through the Vale Nebula was without incident?" Ambassador Donovan stepped forward with rehearsed diplomacy. "Most pleasant, thank you. We're honored to continue these milestone negotiations on neutral ground." As the ceremonial pleasantries continued, Marcus scanned the grand reception hall. Something felt wrong. The cerulean security personnel flanked their ambassador in standard formation, but their attention seemed scattered. Valkayan, their security chief, repeatedly touched a communication device embedded in his wrist guard, his compound eyes darting to the exits. Marcus subtly shifted his weight, gaining a better angle on the upper walkways. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Someone ducking behind a column who wore neither station uniform nor diplomatic insignia. "Lieutenant," Marcus whispered, "Northeast Quadrant, upper tier." Harlow followed his gaze. "Probably maintenance personnel." "Not in those garments," Marcus countered, noticing movement from the northwest corner as well. "Multiple positions. This pattern is irregular." Before Harlow could respond, Marcus spotted it, the unmistakable glint of an energy weapon being assembled. Protocol evaporated from his mind. He lunged forward, crossing the diplomatic non-contact boundary and tackling Ambassador Terrace to the ground just as a high-pitched whine cut through the chamber. The explosion that followed sent fragments of decorative crystalline sculpture raining down precisely where she had stood moments before. "Remain down," Marcus commanded, shielding her blue-skinned form with his body as chaos erupted around them. "How dare you violate diplomatic sanctity?" Terrace began, her voice vibrating with indignation beneath him. A second blast cut her protest short. Marcus rolled them behind a spiral column as cerulean and human security forces scrambled to establish defensive positions. 3 assailants confirmed, he reported into his comm. 2 positioned on the northern gallery, 1 moving toward the eastern portal. Valkayan shouted orders to his team in the melodic cerulean language, but their formation was disintegrating in the confusion. Marcus spotted one of the attackers repositioning with a clear line of sight to their location. "I must transport you to the secure chamber," he told Terrace. "Follow my movements precisely." Her eyes, with their distinctive hexagonal pupils ringed in silver, widened. "My senior advisor, Kelvin." "Your entourage is being secured," Marcus assured her, though he had no verification of this. "Your safety takes precedence." An energy blast sizzled past them, scorching the column mere centimeters from Terrace's head. Marcus made a split-second assessment, drawing his sidearm. "When I initiate movement, remain directly behind me," he instructed. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he pivoted from cover and fired 3 precise shots. The attacker on the gallery dropped their weapon, which clattered to the floor below. "Move now," he ordered, gripping Terrace's wrist and propelling her toward the nearest security portal. They made it halfway across the hall when 2 more attackers emerged from behind the diplomatic displays. Marcus pushed Terrace behind an overturned table and took position at its edge. "Human," one of the attackers called out in accented standard. "This conflict does not concern you. Stand aside." Marcus's response was a clean shot that disabled the speaker's weapon arm. The second attacker rushed forward wielding what appeared to be a ceremonial vibrospear. Marcus met the charge head-on, blocking the weapon thrust and countering with a strike to the attacker's breathing apparatus. The cerulean possessed strength exceeding human capability, but Marcus had trained specifically for cross-species combat. He redirected the attackers' momentum, using their own force against them, in a throw that sent them crashing into a display of interplanetary artifacts. When the attacker rose, Marcus was waiting. The confrontation that followed was brief but intense. Marcus moved with calculated precision, each strike targeting specific vulnerabilities in cerulean physiology. Within moments, the attacker lay unconscious. Breathing heavily, Marcus returned to Terrace, who observed him with an expression he couldn't interpret. Her facial musculature operated differently from human norms. "Are you injured, Ambassador?" he asked, scanning her for any signs of harm. "I am physically intact," she replied slowly, her gaze shifting from the unconscious attacker back to Marcus. "You possess knowledge of cerulean physiological vulnerability points." There was no time to explain his specialized training. The sound of approaching security teams echoed through the hall. "We must reach the secure room immediately," Marcus insisted, offering his hand. She hesitated momentarily before accepting it, her fingers cool and surprisingly textured against his skin. As they navigated through the chaos towards safety, Marcus felt her studying him. When he glanced back, the diplomatic mask had fallen away, replaced by something far more dangerous to their professional boundaries. Analytical curiosity. They reached the security portal just as Kelvin, Terrace's senior advisor, rushed toward them, his ceremonial robes billowing around his slender frame. "Ambassador, the human security infrastructure has failed catastrophically," he exclaimed, the bioluminescent patterns beneath his skin pulsing with agitation. "We must evacuate you to our vessel immediately." "This human," Terrace replied, gesturing to Marcus, "preserved my life while your security chief was still processing the threat parameters." Kelvin's face darkened to a deep indigo, either embarrassment or anger. "A fortunate coincidence. Director Valkayan has contained the situation now." "Has he?" Terrace's tone carried subtle harmonics that Marcus recognized as skepticism. "Then perhaps he can explain why a human security officer identified the assassins before our entire security contingent did." Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, though inwardly he was surprised by her defense. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "we should continue this discussion within the secure environment." Terrace held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Of course, officer." "Vale," he supplied. "Marcus Vale." "Officer Vale," she repeated, the phonetics of his name taking on an almost musical quality in her pronunciation. "It appears I owe you a life debt according to your species customs." As the security portal sealed behind them, Marcus knew the diplomatic incident was just beginning. What he couldn't possibly anticipate was how completely this moment would transform both their lives and potentially the future of human cerulean relations. "Absolutely unacceptable." Director Valkayan's voice resonated through the emergency council chamber, the bioluminescent patterns beneath his skin flashing in agitated sequences. "The human security apparatus has proven fundamentally inadequate. Ambassador Terrace requires protection from individuals of her own kind." 12 hours had passed since the attack. Marcus stood at parade rest along the curved wall, observing the heated debate unfold. Lieutenant Harlow sat at the crescent-shaped table, outwardly composed but emanating tension in his rigid posture. "With all due respect, Director," Harlow countered, "it was our inadequate team member who identified and neutralized the threat." Terrace, seated at the focal point of the crescent table, had remained silent throughout the exchange. She studied a holographic display containing the preliminary investigation findings, her expression inscrutable as light played across her azure features. "A threat that should never have manifested," Kelvin interjected, the crest along his spine visibly stiffening. "Our intelligence networks indicated no credible danger to this summit." Marcus noticed Ambassador Donovan glancing his way. The human diplomat had been advocating for his immediate removal since the incident, not out of concern for Terrace's safety, but because his actions had violated diplomatic protocol. By standard procedure, he should have been confined to quarters pending review. "If I may address the council," Terrace finally said, deactivating the holographic display with a graceful gesture. The chamber immediately fell silent. The attack demonstrated sophisticated planning and coordination. Our combined intelligence agencies failed to detect it. This suggests either extraordinary preparation or internal compromise. She turned her gaze directly to Marcus. "Officer Vale acted on instinct and training when others hesitated. I find such qualities valuable." "Ambassador," Kelvin leaned toward her, lowering his voice to a register he incorrectly assumed humans couldn't hear. "Allowing a human to serve as personal security violates our most sacred cultural boundaries." "Then perhaps our cultural boundaries require reassessment," Terrace replied with fluid diplomacy. "Until we identify the source of this security failure, I am exercising my diplomatic sovereignty to select my own protective detail. Officer Vale will serve as my primary guardian for the duration of these negotiations." The chamber erupted in protests. Marcus maintained his stoic expression, but inwardly he was stunned. This assignment would place him in the ambassador's personal space, violating dozens of regulations governing human-cerulean interaction. "Ambassador Terrace," Lieutenant Harlow spoke carefully, "while Officer Vale is certainly qualified, there are established boundaries between security personnel and diplomats that—" "Are you questioning my authority, Lieutenant?" Terrace's tone remained melodious, but the challenge was unmistakable. "No, Ambassador, I'm merely highlighting potential complications. I am cognizant of the complications." Her gaze returned to Marcus. "Officer Vale, do you reject this assignment?" All eyes turned to him. Protocol dictated he defer to Lieutenant Harlow, but the question had been direct. "I serve where required, Ambassador," he answered simply. "Then the matter is resolved." Terrace rose in one fluid motion, effectively concluding the discussion. "Officer Vale will report to my quarters in precisely 1 hour for operational briefing. The remainder of the human security contingent will maintain their standard duties." As the assembly dispersed, Lieutenant Harlow pulled Marcus aside. "What the hell happened in that reception hall?" he demanded in a harsh whisper. "She made a unilateral decision, sir. A decision that places you in an impossible position. The Ceruleans maintain strict protocols regarding personal proximity, physical contact, even sustained visual engagement. One misstep and you could precipitate a diplomatic crisis far worse than yesterday's incident." Marcus nodded. "I comprehend the risk parameters, sir." "Do you?" Harlow glanced toward the departing Ceruleans. "Because I'm not convinced Ambassador Terrace does. Watch yourself, Vale, and remember where your primary allegiance lies." 1 hour later, Marcus presented himself at the ambassador's private chambers. A visibly anxious Merita, Terrace's attaché, admitted him to an antechamber adorned with strange bioluminescent specimens and floating crystalline spheres. "The ambassador will receive you momentarily," Merita said, eyeing him warily. "Please refrain from touching any objects." Left alone, Marcus took in his surroundings with greater attention. The chamber was maintained at a higher temperature than the human sections of the station, with atmospheric adjustments that created a slightly denser air pressure. He recognized environmental adaptations designed to replicate conditions on the Cerulean homeworld. "Does our environmental calibration cause you discomfort, Officer Vale?" Terrace's voice came from behind him. Marcus turned, maintaining a respectful distance. "No, Ambassador. My adaptation training included extended exposure to Cerulean atmospheric conditions." She circled him slowly, her movements fluid and assessing. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin seemed to shift in response to her thoughts, creating subtle geometric configurations. "Yet another unexpected qualification," she observed. Tell me, are all human security personnel so thoroughly prepared for cross-species protection? No, Ambassador. I specialized in xenobiological adaptation and interspecies security protocols. Is that how you possess the knowledge to target precisely our physiological vulnerability points? Most beings require years of study to understand cerulean biology with such accuracy. There was something in her tone, not suspicion exactly, but intense analytical curiosity. I underwent extensive specialized training, Marcus replied simply. Indeed. She halted her circling and faced him directly. Standard security protocols would have you positioned outside my chambers, verify my transport routes, and maintain a minimum distance of 2 meters at all times. Such measures will be insufficient. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Ambassador, someone wishes me dead, Terrace stated with clinical detachment. Someone with high-level access and operational knowledge. Until I identify the responsible parties, I require proximity. She stepped forward, deliberately violating the diplomatic buffer zone. Does this proximity cause you discomfort? My personal comfort is irrelevant to your security, Ambassador. A smile touched her lips. How quintessentially human, pragmatic to the point of self-sacrifice. She stepped back. We will begin by reassessing the security arrangements for tomorrow's cultural exchange. I anticipate you will have modifications to propose. As they worked through the plans, Marcus systematically identified and corrected vulnerabilities in her security protocols. Each time, Terrace observed him with that same curious expression, occasionally challenging his assessments, but ultimately accepting his recommendations. By the conclusion of their session, they had restructured nearly every security measure for her public appearances. Professional boundaries had been established, then methodically reconsidered in the name of safety. And though neither acknowledged it verbally, something else was developing beneath the surface. A foundation of trust, unprecedented and potentially dangerous, beginning to form between human and cerulean. The Cerulean Cultural Exchange was held in Celestial Nexus's Grand Atrium, transformed for the occasion with floating luminescence globes and living botanical installations. Diplomats from 12 species mingled beneath a transparent dome, showcasing the spectacular stellar nursery beyond. Marcus stood 3 paces behind Terrace, close enough to intervene if necessary, yet maintaining the appearance of proper protocol. His eyes constantly surveyed the space, identifying potential threats and escape routes. Ambassador Terrace, a reptilian diplomat, approached, inclining their head in the traditional cerulean greeting. The Xanthian Confederacy extends its hopes for successful negotiations. Terrace returned the gesture with perfect form. We welcome the Confederacy's interest in our discussions. As she navigated the diplomatic currents, Marcus noted how different factions approached her, some with genuine warmth, others with barely disguised hostility. When a group of cerulean officials from a conservative faction cornered her, tension radiated from their tight circle. The Ancestral Covenant explicitly forbids certain concessions being contemplated, one official said, just loudly enough for Marcus to hear. The Covenant also speaks of evolution and adaptation, Terrace replied, as you would understand if you practiced the 7th tide meditation with proper devotion. The official stiffened, the bioluminescent patterns beneath his skin flashing in jagged sequences. You question my spiritual discipline? Marcus shifted his position slightly, drawing the official's attention. The subtle movement sufficed to remind them they were under observation. Perhaps we should continue this discussion at the Temple of Cosmic Currents, Terrace suggested smoothly, after the traditional starlight blessing ceremony. The official's expression showed momentary confusion, then comprehension. I regret I will be unable to attend the blessing this cycle, he muttered, withdrawing from her presence. Later, as they moved to a quieter section of the atrium, Terrace glanced back at Marcus. You recognize the significance of the 7th tide meditation and the temple blessing rituals? It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. Your culture places significant emphasis on ritual observance as validation of authority. The official couldn't attend a blessing ceremony that doesn't exist in your actual traditions. A smile played at her lips. Most humans wouldn't recognize that cultural leverage point. Most humans aren't assigned to protect cerulean diplomats. Most ceruleans wouldn't permit it, she countered, then paused as Ambassador Donovan approached. The human diplomat smiled tightly. Ambassador Terrace, I see your unconventional security arrangement persists. Officer Vale has proven invaluable, Terrace replied. His cultural knowledge is particularly impressive. Donovan's smile didn't reach her eyes. Indeed, one might question why a security officer possesses such specialized knowledge. The implied accusation hung in the air. Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, but Terrace visibly bristled, the patterns beneath her skin accelerating. One might wonder why a human ambassador would question her own security personnel's qualifications, she said coolly, especially when those qualifications have already preserved lives. Before Donovan could respond, Merida appeared at Terrace's side, whispering urgently in her ear. Terrace's expression shifted subtly, the patterns beneath her skin momentarily freezing. If you'll excuse me, Ambassador, she said, a matter requires my immediate attention. Once they were alone in a small antechamber, Terrace turned to Marcus. There's been a communication from the High Council. They've expressed concerns about my security arrangements. They want you removed. Me, Marcus stated. It wasn't a question. Yes. Her eyes met his. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the growing trust that transcended their professional relationship. The negotiations enter a critical phase tomorrow, she continued. I require someone I can rely on without reservation. You trust me to that extent? I trust what I've observed, she replied simply. In my experience, Officer Vale, actions reveal truth far more reliably than words. As they returned to the reception, Marcus noticed how Terrace positioned herself, always keeping him within her visual field, a silent anchor amid the swirling political currents. When a minor diplomatic confrontation threatened to escalate, it was to Marcus she glanced, drawing strength from his steady presence before diffusing the situation with practiced diplomacy. By the evening's conclusion, something fundamental had shifted. The security protocols that had once seemed like essential barriers now felt like arbitrary constructs, meaningless compared to the genuine connection forming between them. A connection neither had anticipated, yet neither could deny. The secondary negotiation site was a converted military outpost orbiting a desolate moon. Isolated, defensible, and according to Lieutenant Harlow, significantly easier to secure than that diplomatic circus. Marcus completed his third perimeter sweep, methodically checking each security node. The limited personnel permitted at the outpost meant he was working extended shifts, but he preferred it this way. It kept his mind occupied, away from thoughts that increasingly violated professional boundaries. Officer Vale, Terrace approached, offering a steaming cup. Thought you might need this. He accepted the coffee gratefully. Any anomalies on the external monitoring systems? Nothing unusual. Terrace leaned against the corridor wall. Though I did notice something strange about the supply manifest from yesterday. Medical inventory doesn't align with what was logged at departure. Show me, Marcus said. In the security office, Terrace pulled up the records. See? Requisitioned supplies include standard medications, but there's a discrepancy in the controlled substances. The verification signatures show inconsistencies as well. Could be administrative error, Marcus said, but his instincts suggested otherwise. Who had access to the manifest? That's the concerning part. Too many individuals. Station personnel, medical staff, even several diplomatic aides. Marcus downloaded the records to his personal device. I'll investigate this. Don't discuss it with anyone else for now. Later that evening, he escorted Terrace back to her quarters after a grueling 14-hour negotiation session. The strain of the talks was evident in the subtle rigidity of her movements. The trade minister is being deliberately obstructive, she said as the door closed behind them. The privacy of her quarters had evolved into a space where titles and formalities receded. He's opposed the treaty from the beginning, yet you specifically requested his inclusion in the delegation, Marcus observed. Maintain proximity to your allies, closer proximity to your adversaries. Terrace removed her ceremonial mantle, placing it carefully on a illuminated stand. I prefer having him where I can observe his actions, rather than working against me from unseen positions. Marcus noted how she automatically spoke using I rather than we when referencing her government. You don't fully trust your own delegation? She looked at him sharply. Should I? I've analyzed the security footage from the initial attack. The assailants knew precisely when the human security sweep would create a 3-second monitoring gap. He hesitated, then added, only someone with access to our security protocols would possess that information. Taris sank into a hovering chair. You believe there's a traitor among us. I believe someone wants these negotiations to fail. Marcus showed her the supply manifest discrepancies. And they're preparing something more. She studied the data, her expression darkening, the patterns beneath her skin slowing to an ominous pulse. Most of these substances would be lethal to cerulean physiology. But not to humans, Marcus noted. It could be staged to appear as a human assassination attempt. If I'm killed by apparent human action, the treaty dies with me and potentially triggers an interstellar conflict, Marcus finished. A heavy silence fell between them. Why are these negotiations so important to you? Marcus asked quietly. Beyond the diplomatic significance. Taris rose and moved to the viewport, gazing at the distant stars. My family was eliminated in the border conflict 20 years ago. I was raised by a human scientific family on a frontier colony until my government discovered my survival. Her voice carried no emotion, but Marcus sensed the depth beneath. I've inhabited both worlds. I know cooperation isn't merely possible, it's essential for both our species. The revelation stunned him. Her personal history had been meticulously purged from all official records. You've never shared this publicly. It would undermine my credibility with my people, she said. To them, I must be a pure cerulean aristocrat, untouched by human influence. Marcus moved closer, propriety momentarily forgotten. Your secret remains safe with me. Her gaze lifted to his. I know. The distance between them seemed suddenly charged with unspoken possibility. Marcus took a step back, reasserting professional boundaries. I should complete my security verification before shift change, he said. Taris nodded, composure restored. Of course! As Marcus exited her quarters, he found Kelvin waiting in the corridor, eyes cold with suspicion. You remained in the ambassador's private chambers for 23 minutes, he stated. Protocol permits a maximum of 4 minutes for security consultation. We were discussing significant security concerns, Marcus replied evenly. Were you? Kelvin stepped closer. Ambassador Taris may have developed a misplaced trust in humans, but others have not. Remember your assigned position, officer. After Kelvin departed, Marcus's comm unit activated. Taris's voice came through, tense and urgent. Vale, you need to review this immediately. Security footage from Cargo Bay 3, timestamp 0400 hours. The recording showed a hooded figure accessing a restricted control panel. When they turned, their face was briefly visible. Marcus froze the image, enhancement revealing a face he recognized instantly. Valkayan, the Cerulean security director, supposedly still on Celestial Nexus. The threat isn't external. It was inserted internally. Taris's voice remained steady despite the damning evidence displayed before her. If Valkayan is involved, the conspiracy extends to the highest levels of Cerulean security. They were in a maintenance alcove selected for its lack of surveillance. Marcus had deactivated his comm unit and swept for monitoring devices before sharing his discovery. We need to report this to Lieutenant Harlow, he said. Not yet. Taris's eyes held a fierce intensity. We don't know how far this extends into your command structure either. Marcus wanted to object but couldn't dismiss the evidence. The precision of the attacks, the missing supplies, Valkayan's presence. It all indicated a sophisticated operation with support from both sides. What about your attaché? Merida has been with you for years, which makes her placement ideal for long-term infiltration. Taris shook her head. I wish to trust her, but I cannot accept the risk. The reality of their situation settled between them, isolated, surrounded by potential enemies, with the fate of interspecies relations hanging in the balance. We need irrefutable evidence we can present to both governments, Marcus said. Something undeniable. The negotiations resume in 6 hours. They must be planning to act before then. Marcus considered their options. We'll need to create a trap, make them believe they've succeeded in driving a wedge between us. A public disagreement, Taris nodded, but privately we continue collaboration. I'll have Taris monitor the station systems for unusual activity. She's the only individual I'm reasonably certain we can trust. And I'll propose strengthening the treaty's security provisions. It will force anyone opposed to reveal themselves. The maintenance doors suddenly slid open. Both froze as Ambassador Donovan entered, stopping short at the sight of them. "Well," she said coolly, "this certainly exceeds protocol boundaries." "Ambassador Donovan?" Marcus straightened. "Save your explanations, officer. I've seen enough." Her eyes narrowed. "The question becomes, what action will I take?" Terrace stepped forward. "What do you want, Diana?" The use of her first name appeared to surprise Donovan. "The truth would be an appropriate beginning. Why are you two meeting in maintenance corridors instead of secure briefing rooms?" A moment of silent communication passed between Marcus and Terrace. With a subtle nod, she gave him permission. "We have evidence of a conspiracy involving both human and cerulean officials," he said, "including some in security leadership." Donovan's expression shifted from suspicion to alarm. "Show me." After reviewing the evidence, Donovan pressed her fingertips against her temples. "If your assessment is accurate, we're all in danger. But why approach me now?" "Because we require someone with diplomatic authority who isn't connected to security channels," Terrace explained. "And you believe I'm trustworthy?" "Because you've been transparent in your opposition to my methods," Terrace said. "An infiltrator would employ more subtle tactics." A ghost of a smile touched Donovan's lips. "An indirect compliment, but I'll accept it." As they formulated their strategy, the station's emergency indicators suddenly activated. The artificial gravity fluctuated, sending them staggering against the walls. "That's not coincidental," Marcus said, drawing his weapon. "We need to move immediately." They had barely reached the corridor when an explosion rocked the station. Debris cascaded down, a jagged metal fragment slicing across Marcus's arm as he shielded Terrace. "Go!" he shouted to Donovan. "Reach the command center!" As Donovan disappeared down the corridor, Marcus pulled Terrace into an adjacent service tunnel. Blood soaked his sleeve, but he ignored it, focused entirely on securing her safety. "You're injured," Terrace said, halting him with a hand against his chest. "It's superficial." "It is not superficial." Her fingers brushed his wound, coming away stained crimson. "Your species bleeds so readily." Something in her touch, gentle yet electric, broke through the professional barrier he'd maintained for weeks. Their eyes met in the dim emergency lighting, and suddenly protocol seemed meaningless compared to the truth between them. "Terrace," he said, using her name without title for the first time. She moved closer, one hand resting over his heart. "I've never trusted another being the way I trust you." The moment crystallized. A diplomat and her guardian, divided by species, united by choice, and now something more profound than either had anticipated. When her lips met his, it felt like the inevitable culmination of a journey they'd begun the moment he tackled her to safety in that reception hall. The explosion had been merely the opening move. For 3 hours, Marcus and Terrace navigated the station service corridors, evading search parties dispatched by Valcoin. Station communications were compromised, security protocols overridden. "They're systematically hunting us," Marcus whispered as they paused at a junction. His makeshift bandage was saturated, the wound deeper than he'd acknowledged. "Engineering level provides our best option. We can access the emergency beacon there." Terrace's gaze lingered on his injury. "You've lost concerning quantities of blood." "I'm functional," he insisted, though the lightheadedness suggested otherwise. They descended 2 more levels before encountering a sealed bulkhead. Marcus accessed the manual override, but the mechanism seized halfway. "The hydraulic system is malfunctioning," he muttered, wedging himself into the narrow gap to force it wider. The exertion reopened his wound, fresh blood spreading across his uniform. "Marcus, stop!" Terrace pulled him back, her strength surprising him. "There's an alternative route." Before he could protest, footsteps echoed from the corridor behind them. A voice called out in cerulean, Kelvin's voice. "Ambassador Terrace, we've secured the station. Identify your location immediately." Terrace pressed a finger to Marcus's lips, shaking her head in warning. They remained motionless until the search party passed. "We cannot trust Kelvin either," she whispered. "Is there anyone among your people we can rely on?" Her expression hardened. "At this moment, I'm uncertain if I still have a people." They found refuge in an abandoned maintenance bay, Marcus's condition had deteriorated, his face pale and clammy. "Sit," Taris commanded, guiding him to a storage crate. "I must properly treat that wound." She searched through the bay's emergency supplies, returning with a medical kit. With practiced efficiency, she cut away his sleeve, revealing the jagged laceration beneath. "This will cause discomfort," she warned, cleaning the wound. Marcus clenched his jaw against the pain, but couldn't suppress a hiss when she applied antiseptic. "I apologize," she murmured. "Cerulean medicine functions differently. This is my first experience treating a human injury." "You're performing admirably," he managed. "Where did you acquire medical training?" "All diplomats receive basic emergency medical instruction. We cannot always depend on others in crisis situations." As she worked, her fingers occasionally brushed against uninjured skin, each contact sending a current through him that had nothing to do with pain. "There," she said finally, securing the bandage. "It's imperfect, but should maintain integrity until we can access proper medical facilities." Instead of withdrawing, she remained close, one hand resting on his arm. In the dim light, her eyes reflected an iridescence he hadn't noticed before, the hexagonal pupils expanding slightly. "You've bled for me," she said softly. "No one has ever made such a sacrifice." "Part of my responsibility," he tried to deflect. "No," Taris shook her head. "It transcends duty. What happened between us earlier? Was it a mistake in your assessment?" "A violation of protocol," Marcus completed, though the words felt hollow. "Is that your genuine belief?" He met her gaze directly. "No." The truth hung between them, dangerous and exhilarating. Taris moved closer, her hand rising to touch his face. "In my culture, blood carries significance beyond the physical," she said. "When one bleeds to protect another, it creates a bond. When that blood is given willingly, the bond becomes sacred." Her words carried weight beyond their literal meaning, an acknowledgement of something transforming between them. "We should rest," Marcus said, suddenly aware of their proximity. "A few hours, then we proceed." Taris nodded, but instead of moving away, she settled beside him, her body a line of warmth against his injured side. "My people would consider this the most severe breach of protocol," she murmured, a diplomat seeking comfort from her protector. "And what do you consider it?" "Essential," she replied simply. In the darkness of their hiding place, with enemies searching and diplomatic relations unraveling, they found brief solace in each other's presence. Taris's head eventually came to rest on his shoulder, her breathing slowing as exhaustion claimed her. Marcus remained vigilant despite his injury, his arm encircling her protectively, crossing a boundary he'd once considered inviolable. Whatever followed, he knew with absolute certainty that he would give far more than his blood to ensure her safety. Not because of duty, but because against all protocol and logic, he had fallen in love with her. The station's day cycle brought no relief. Marcus and Taris navigated through maintenance shafts toward the communications hub, where they hoped to transmit a secure message to trusted authorities on both worlds. "The hub lies just ahead," Marcus whispered, checking his tactical display. "2 guards posted outside." "Cerulean or human?" Taris asked. "One of each species. They're working in coordination." They exchanged a grim look. The conspiracy was more extensive than they'd feared. "I can create a diversion," Taris offered. "Draw them away from the entrance." Marcus shook his head. "Too hazardous. We proceed together or not at all." His hand found hers in the dimness, fingers intertwining. Since their moment of intimacy the night before, something had fundamentally transformed between them. Regulations and protocol giving way to a deeper trust. "There's an alternative approach," Taris said suddenly. "The environmental control access. It's positioned directly above the communications hub." They located the access panel and slipped inside, crawling through the narrow duct until they were positioned above the hub. Through the ventilation grate, they could see a single technician monitoring the systems. "On my signal," Marcus mouthed. As they dropped into the room simultaneously, Marcus neutralized the technician with a precise strike while Taris secured the door. "We have minimal time," she said, taking position at a console. Marcus began encoding a message containing all their evidence, setting it to transmit to both human and cerulean authorities. "Will they accept our evidence?" Taris asked, her voice carrying an unusual vulnerability. "They'll be compelled to investigate. The evidence is too compelling to dismiss." As the transmission completed, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. Whatever happened next, the truth would be known. In that moment of success, the professional boundaries between them seemed absurd. Terrace must have felt it too. She moved toward him, purpose in every step. "Marcus," she said, his name a question and answer simultaneously. He knew he should maintain distance, preserve what little remained of protocol. Instead, he drew her close, one hand cradling her face. "This defies all logic," he whispered. "Perhaps," she agreed, "but it's our shared defiance." When their lips met, it wasn't the desperate connection of their earlier encounter, but something deliberate, profound. Her body aligned with his, as though designed for perfect integration, her azure skin radiating a warmth that called to something primal within him. "If they locate us," he began. "They won't," she silenced him with another kiss, more insistent. "Not yet." In the secured communications hub, surrounded by danger, they surrendered to what had been building between them since that first moment in the reception hall. Uniforms and formal attire yielded to exploration and discovery, the differences in their physiologies creating territories of pleasure rather than barriers. Afterward, they lay together in a moment of impossible tranquility, the station's recycled air cool against heated skin. "In my culture," Terrace murmured, tracing the outline of his bandaged wound, "this would be considered a binding ritual, the offering of body after the offering of blood." "And in mine," Marcus replied, "it would constitute grounds for immediate dismissal." A small laugh escaped her. "We are pioneers in diplomatic relations?" The levity faded as reality reasserted itself. Marcus checked his tactical display, noting with alarm that security patrols were converging on their location. "They've tracked the transmission origin," he said, quickly gathering his uniform. "We must relocate immediately." As they dressed, the weight of their situation returned. If captured, their newfound connection would be weaponized against them, evidence of compromised judgment, of protocols violated beyond redemption. "Whatever transpires," Terrace said, her diplomat's composure returning, "I harbor no regrets." Marcus secured his weapon. "Neither do I." The admission lingered between them as they prepared to face whatever came next, not as guardian and diplomat, but as partners bound by more than duty or protocol could define. "We need to separate," Marcus said as they reached a junction in the service corridors. "It's our optimal strategy to expose the conspiracy." Terrace's expression hardened. "I find this plan unacceptable." "I share your sentiment," he checked his tactical display. "But if we're both captured, everything ends. This way, one of us may succeed." The strategy was dangerous but necessary. Terrace would return to the diplomatic quarters claiming she had been held against her will by Marcus, playing into the conspirators' narrative while gathering intelligence from within. Meanwhile, Marcus would access the station's security core to obtain irrefutable proof of the collaborators' actions. "If I fail to appear at the rendezvous point in 3 hours..." "You will appear," Terrace interrupted, refusing to consider the alternative. Their farewell was brief but intense, both aware it might be their final moment together. As Marcus made his way toward the security core, he encountered Officer Terrace at a checkpoint. "Vale!" she exclaimed, weapon raised. "Halt! You're wanted for abducting Ambassador Terrace and sabotaging station systems." Marcus raised his hand slowly, keeping his voice level. "Terrace, you know me. You viewed the footage from Cargo Bay 3. Valkayan is involved, and this extends deeper than you realize." Her grip on the weapon wavered, but her eyes remained sharp. "You're accusing the Cerulean security director? That's an extraordinary allegation, Vale." "I possess evidence," he said. "The manifest discrepancies, the footage, it's all documented. Someone is attempting to frame me to derail the treaty." Terrace hesitated, then lowered her weapon slightly. "Show me, quickly." Marcus handed her his device, maintaining deliberate movements. She scanned the files, her frown deepening with each new piece of information. This validates your claims. But why target you specifically?" "Because I became too close to Terrace," he admitted, "and they know she trusts me. Help me reach the security core, Terrace. We can end this." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you're deceiving me, I'll neutralize you myself." Acceptable terms, Marcus said, relieved. Let's proceed. They navigated the station's lower levels, avoiding patrols. Terrace's access codes bypassed 2 lockdowns, but the security core was heavily guarded. Marcus crouched behind a maintenance panel, scanning the entrance. 4 guards, 2 human, 2 cerulean, stood at alert. We can't engage that force directly, Terrace whispered. Alternative suggestions? Marcus's mind raced through options. The ventilation shaft above the core. It's confined, but I can maneuver through it. You create a diversion? Terrace nodded faintly. I excel at creating distractions. Give me 30 seconds. She slipped away and soon an alarm blared from a nearby corridor, drawing 3 guards away. Marcus seized the opportunity, ascending into the shaft and crawling toward the core. The remaining guard failed to notice as he dropped silently behind them, incapacitating them with a precise strike. Inside the core, Marcus accessed the primary terminal. The system was a labyrinth of encrypted files, but his specialized training activated. He isolated Valkayan's access logs, revealing unauthorized entries into the station's weapon systems and communications. A hidden directory contained orders to sabotage the treaty, verified with the Cerulean High Council authentication seal. Found you, Marcus murmured, initiating a data transfer. An alert flashed. Someone had triggered a manual override. The door slid open, revealing Kelvin and 2 Cerulean guards, weapons drawn. You demonstrate remarkable persistence, human, Kelvin sneered, but this concludes now. Marcus dove behind a console as energy bolts scorched the air around him. He returned fire, striking 1 guard's shoulder. Kelvin's aim proved more accurate, grazing Marcus's thigh. Pain flared, but he compartmentalized it, focusing on the terminal. The download had reached 92%. Surrender, Vale, Kelvin called. You cannot prevail. The download completed. Marcus transmitted the files to Terrace's device and triggered a station-wide broadcast exposing Valkayan's orders. Kelvin's eyes widened as the terminal screens displayed the incriminating evidence. You! Kelvin lunged, but Marcus reacted faster, tackling him to the ground. They grappled. Kelvin's superior strength nearly overwhelming, but Marcus targeted a specific nerve cluster he'd studied in Cerulean physiology. Kelvin collapsed, gasping. Marcus secured him with restraints just as Terrace burst in, reinforcements behind her. Impressive work, Vale. Station security is realigning to our side. Terrace, Marcus asked, heart pounding. She's secure, Terrace said. Donovan escorted her to the command center. Valkayan has been detained. Marcus exhaled, relief flooding his system. Let's complete this. In the command center, Terrace stood beside Ambassador Donovan, her expression a mask of diplomatic composure. But her eyes softened when Marcus entered, limping but alive. The room hummed with activity as human and Cerulean officials reviewed the broadcasted evidence. Officer Vale, Donovan said, her tone reluctantly respectful, your actions have exposed a conspiracy that could have destroyed this summit. You have my gratitude. And mine, Terrace added, stepping forward. Her voice carried a warmth that tightened Marcus's chest. You risked everything. I fulfilled my duty, Ambassador, he said, though his eyes communicated more. Valkayan, restrained nearby, glared at them with undisguised hatred. You imagine this changes the outcome? The treaty will still fail. Too many oppose integration. Terrace faced him, her voice steady. Your actions demonstrate precisely why this treaty is essential. We cannot allow fear and isolationism to define our future. Lieutenant Harlow approached, his expression unreadable. Vale, you violated protocol in ways I cannot overlook, but you saved lives and preserved the negotiations. That carries significant weight. Will there be consequences? Marcus asked. A formal review, Harlow sighed, but I suspect Ambassador Terrace's testimony will influence the outcome considerably. Terrace's gaze met Marcus's, a silent promise. I'll ensure the review process is equitable, Lieutenant. The negotiations resumed the following day, but the atmosphere had transformed. The exposed conspiracy united the delegations, and compromises were reached with unexpected efficiency. Terrace's leadership, bolstered by her survival and Marcus's actions, silenced her critics. The treaty was signed in an intimate ceremony, broadcast to both human and cerulean worlds as a symbol of unity. Marcus stood at the rear of the chamber, his injuries treated, his role as Terrace's guardian officially concluded. Protocol demanded distance, but when Terrace glanced at him during her address, her smile was meant for him alone. After the ceremony, she found him in a quiet corridor. "You are no longer my assigned protector, Marcus Vale." "I'm aware," he said, stepping closer despite himself. "Does that alter what exists between us?" She tilted her head, studying him. "In my culture, a bond forged through blood and trust cannot be casually severed. But you are human. Your people perceive relationships differently." "My people can dismiss me for what we've shared," he said directly, "but I consider it irrelevant. I meant what I expressed in the communications hub. This, us, justifies any consequence." Terrace's fingers brushed his, a gesture both tentative and bold. "Then we confront those consequences together. I've requested a permanent diplomatic assignment to human space. There is much to discover, and perhaps a place for us to explore possibilities." Marcus's heart accelerated. "You would leave your homeworld?" "For peace," she said softly, "and for you." He drew her close, protocol forgotten. Her warmth, her scent, the iridescence in her azure eyes was all he required. "Then I'll accompany you, wherever that path leads." 6 months later, Marcus stood on a balcony overlooking a human colony world, the air crisp with autumn's approach. Terrace joined him, her cerulean ceremonial garments blending with human-style clothing, a symbol of her new role as a cultural liaison. The review had been lenient, thanks to her influence and Donovan's unexpected support. Marcus's rank was reduced, but he'd been reassigned to her security detail, a compromise that satisfied them both. "The stars appear different from this perspective," Terrace said, leaning against him. "They're identical stars," Marcus replied, encircling her azure form with his arm. "Merely a changed vantage point." She smiled, her hand finding his. Below, diplomats from both species intermingled, their conversation a testament to the treaty's success. Marcus and Terrace had weathered intense scrutiny, their relationship a scandal to some, an inspiration to others. But in moments like this, with her beside him, the universe felt aligned. "Do you ever reflect on that first day aboard Celestial Nexus?" he asked. "Every day," she said. "You tackled me to the ground. Hardly conventional diplomacy." He chuckled. "Preserved your life, though. And transformed mine," she added, her voice softening. "Yours as well, I hope." Marcus kissed her forehead, the gesture now natural between them, more profoundly than you realize. They stood together watching the stars, two pioneers who had rewritten protocol through blood, trust, and love. The future remained uncertain, but they would face it as they had faced everything else, side by side, human and cerulean, bound by a connection no regulation could dissolve.